Take a quick look at the developments in the mass strike. Certainly, the paralysis has continued, the obsession with process. We look at Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, we see no leaders, no program. No leaders have been allowed to emerge from this undigestible mass, the swamp of the General Assembly. No program has been approved. The program should have been the first order of business. That should have been done in an hour or two with a fighting program of class-based demands. Student loan amnesty, cancel it all. $1 trillion is shredded. Pay for it with a 1% Wall Street sales tax. Reach out to the people. Stop all foreclosures. No cuts in the social safety net. No cuts in programs for workers, children, old people, or families. Nobody should be cut except Wall Street. Cut corporate welfare to them. And then, of course, the little matter of nationalizing the Federal Reserve. Nationalize it. That credit-creating power belongs to the people. Don't give it back to Wall Street zombie bankers. They don't know what to do with it. They'll destroy the world. And then we want infrastructure. We want this country rebuilt from the bottom up at the highest level of technology, not green job scams and boondoggles. We want modern technology, modern energy production, people, and that means nuclear, and anything else is pure pipe dreams by Malthusian rich elitists out there in Big Sur. And we want 30 million new productive jobs at union wages. Davis-Bacon wages is what we need. A movement without big ideas goes nowhere. No movement has ever gone anywhere without at least one big idea. My 5-point program provides the basic outlines of the big idea articulated into quite a series of big ideas. But, of course, you couldn't get that through the straitjacket, the Procrustean bed of the General Assembly. Now, the process focus, essentially the program of these occupations turns out to be themselves. They're sort of like the old SPD in the Second International pre-1914, right? The goal is nothing, the movement is everything, the day-to-day process. Well, that's the language of opportunism and the language of impotence. So on the one side, we're told that the program is that everybody should have General Assemblies, facilitators, everybody should have workshops, everybody should have this crazy apparatus, the human microphones, the chanting, the leaderless group, the brainwashing, developed, as we're reminded, by the Rockefeller Foundation in the late 1940s and then taken from there. The process is, do we have to leave the site to get it cleaned, and do we have to fight to cross the Brooklyn Bridge? All of this stuff, very dramatic and very interesting to the people taking part, the people who are gripped by the emotional satisfaction of being part of a fused group. We'll do a special number maybe next week on the fused group, because I've been in them. Certainly, in 1968, at the corner of Michigan and Balbo, we had a fused group going. But the problem is that this inebriating and heady, though the experience is, this is not the substance of the mass strike, which has to be leadership, program, organization, mass struggle, and then winning. And that means winning means you take power, not some general or some Obama or some other faker from the Democratic Party. So right now the focus is Boston was kicked out of their site. Portland was kicked out of their site. Denver was kicked out of their site. New York says that they're holding on because they don't want their park fumigated. Well, the right-wing commentators are having a field day. To the extent that Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, is simply a blank space, Limbaugh, Hannity rushed to fill it in with flesh piles, group sex, defecation, loony left, hippies, fleas, and all the rest, right? That's what happens when you don't make the agenda. And the way you make the agenda is with your hard-hitting, class-based, programmatic demands. And you also you ought to allow a leader to occur. The idea here is that the facilitators, these creeps, these creepy, repulsive individuals like the one we saw in Atlanta, that leadership is simply a technical question of knowing the rules from Gelderloos and various manuals from Gene Sharp and the Albert Einstein Institute and other purveyors of color revolution. No, the dynamic between a mass leadership and the base and the broader public and concentric circles of radiating influence, this is the revolutionary process. And you're going to abort that by saying, no, we don't want leaders, we just want these creeps. And what does that lead to? Well, we saw it in Atlanta. The the obvious thing is you have a demonstration that's made up largely of students and the unemployed. You got to reach out to other groups. You got to get workers. You've got to get the black community. You got to get Hispanics. You got to get women. You got to get soldiers. You've got to get every significant group in the society. So here comes Congressman Lewis. Whatever you think of him, he's a civil rights hero, an authentic representative of the black community. If only for the following reason, he should have been allowed to speak. Anybody with brains would say, well, here's an emissary of the black community. He wants to give us support. We want to welcome him and make him feel at home, and then we want to engage in a serious programmatic discussion about what to do. And that's a way to try to invite the black community into demonstrations where they are very much underrepresented. They're underrepresented in New York, and they're underrepresented in these other places, too. So the creep, what does he do? No. And the swamp, there's a majority that wants him to speak, but the anti-authoritarian Oedipal swamp is big enough to say, no, we stick to our agenda. So they rebuff him. That gets on the NBC Nightly News. That's a wonderful job. Congratulations on a big piece of prize political stupidity. Well, of course, it's not stupidity. Is the guy a fool or is he a wrecker? Well, only his shrink knows for sure, I guess, but it looks like a wrecker to me. So what's behind all this? Well, Adbusters, a foundation in Canada, a foundation from Vancouver, British Columbia. One of the leaders is a guy from the Baltic states. What are they known for? Gosh, let's not go down that road at the moment. Maybe we can find out. The other guy's biography, the other guy's name is Schmaltz. Schmaltz's biography has disappeared from the internet. So this is Adbusters. What are they? The methods are those of the Situationist International. What's the Situationist International? It's a group of washed-up French literary beatniks in the late 1950s who were put together by MI6, the SDEC, and NATO intelligence in general to be part, they're the creative wing, you might say, of the 1968 destabilization of General de Gaulle of France, that great national leader who was such a thorn in the side of NATO. So we're seeing the Situationist International ride again, their methods being used by Adbusters and the Passionaria Alexa O'Brien. But more about this in just a minute on World Crisis Radio, Mass Strike Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. As we were saying, those secret facilitators are there to make sure that no organic mass leaders emerge, that no organic mass program can emerge. Let's set up the demands of kick out these facilitators, kick them out, send them home, majority rules, and no foundation operatives allowed. Foundation operatives should leave the demonstrations. Now, speaking of organic mass leaders, here's one. We've heard him in previous weeks. It's Eric Draitser in New York City, who has been the key man in two important teach-ins, which are providing some programmatic content to fill the void left by these facilitators. But Eric is going to give us a report now on what's going on, in particular, some new methods of manipulation, I think, that have been brought in by the Foundation people. Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Webster. Okay, so what we're seeing, there's a couple of developments from this past week. Number one is we have a better system of identifying these infiltrators, the people who are trying to subvert Occupy Wall Street. I know that one thing that you always like is you want to name names, so let's name some names. First organization we have to be looking at is the Alliance for Global Justice. Okay, taking from their website, this quote in their mission statement, they say, "We envision societies which explore and implement alternatives to governments, to global financial institutions, and to multinationals which dominate, denigrate people and ecosystems." Of course, what this is a front or a facade for anarchists, right? The wreckers of these movements. The second organization which we have to be looking at, this is Food Not Bombs. I repeat, Food Not Bombs. This is a cover, right? This is another anarchist cover. These are either anarchists or anarchist sympathizers who implant themselves. Okay, this is what they do. They implant themselves within these movements using the innocuous name Food Not Bombs. They're not about food. They're not about providing something for, the greater good, or they may be on the surface. But really what they do is they are made up of buffoons. They're made up of wreckers. I have a particular one that I want to point out that people need to be aware of. It's a guy named Alexander Penley. That's Penley. This guy is about 40, 41 years old. He claims to be a lawyer, and he claims to be affiliated specifically with the hacker group Anonymous and with WikiLeaks, okay? These are CIA connections. You can draw a tangible link between the CIA to Anonymous, to WikiLeaks, to this guy, and to Food Not Bombs. This is one of these structures, right? One of the ways in which they're infiltrating and subverting this movement. This is crucial for people to be following. Occupy Wall Street is not in and of itself anarchist. But what is happening is they're getting these groups involved in it in order to break them apart. Okay, this is the strategy. Now, what we want to look at is
this the Food Not Bombs. The reports are that large quantities of food are delivered. Is it some? They have something to do with that? In other words, you get the idea foundations are delivering food, and then somebody can take credit for it and say, "Oh, you can thank me because you got a free lunch."
Right, and so I actually asked multiple people about these food donations, and what I'm getting is the way that they explain this away is that local restaurants, local businesses who support this movement are doing that. Now, my response to that was, yeah, but I'm seeing hand truck after hand truck after hand truck of food coming in here. I don't think that a local restaurant is going to be donating untouched, brand new packaged food. I don't think that's how it's going to work. So, but I can't speak to that specifically because it's very difficult to get tangible evidence of where that food is coming from. Now, I want to also point out another thing that I mentioned, I believe last week, and this is the presence of military or ex-military operatives. And so I believe you have those photographs on your website, and I want to point out those two guys that you see pictured on tarpley.net in that article. These two, I now have an eyewitness account, which I was able to verify by cross-checking. An eyewitness account of these two specifically involved in an incident. Now, I want to quickly outline this incident. So, you have a protester, and he gets sort of in a confrontation with a police officer. Not a violent confrontation, but tempers were rising. Okay, and what happens? These two guys, this guy Brendan, whatever his last name might be, with the bald head, and then this other guy with the green do-rag, they immediately run into the middle of this incident. This is what I would call containment, right? And what they do is they immediately get very rough. And who do they get rough with? They get rough with the protester. Okay? They get rough with the protester, and they don't the tactic is what we have to really look at. This is not just a person who's involved in trying to handle security who might say, calm down, let's all be rational. No. This is violent and rough containment. And then the bald-headed one goes to the police officer, and he says the following. This is a quote. He says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." Okay, this is what he says to the police officer. Now, he then turns around and walks about 10 to 15 yards and goes and speaks with some man in a suit. Presumably, I think ostensibly, this is supposed to be someone who coordinates the police, though I think that it would be fair to assume this might be some kind of a handler. I'm not sure. Somebody who is a case officer maybe and who's there for observation purposes. But I have eyewitness accounts of this interaction happening. Now,
so basically, these guys are acting as goons and bouncers.
Yes, that's correct.
And ideological cops, too, it sounds like.
That's right. And the idea here, I think what they would tell you is, well, their job is to make sure that nothing gets out of hand. I think that what any reasonable-minded person could understand is that, no, it's actually quite the opposite. They're there to make sure that the protesters don't actually begin to talk about anything relevant. Okay, I think this is the idea. Well, they're not containing violence. I think they're containing ideas. And I think that they're also acting
where people bring up concrete programmatic steps in the General Assembly and they're shouted down by this swamp.
I cannot speak to that specifically because I tend to not be able to be there for the General Assembly, and the reason is very simple. Because as you mentioned, these things become so long and drawn out because of the process that, I, unlike many of those people, don't have hours and hours to sit around talking about sleeping bags. So this is the issue. I'm actually going to get to that. I might as well get to that now. So the idea of this General Assembly, and specifically this consensus model. Okay, we've talked about this before. I don't need to go over that again. But what I do want to point out, and that is that there is a very real, very palpable undercurrent of discontent within a core group of the people in Occupy Wall Street who have been there since the beginning. And they've told me, multiple people have told me that they've become very frustrated with this consensus model. Very frustrated, and what's happening is that they are beginning new committees. And that these new committees, which are so far, I think, under the radar, these new committees are designed to formulate demands, to formulate concrete demands, and possibly to go around this consensus model within the General Assembly. I think this is the idea. I was also told by someone who's instrumental in this that they're moving away from consensus and towards majority. Now, here's the issue, though. What I'm also sensing from other people is that this movement to sort of get away from the consensus model is being attacked. It's being attacked by multiple groups or factions within Occupy Wall Street who are attempting to quash this idea.
Hang on, Eric. We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio, your mass strike headquarters. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, your mass strike headquarters. Now, we are in New York City right now, on the line with Eric Draitser. He is one of those organic mass leaders who is emerging from this despite the best efforts of creepy facilitators, foundation operatives, anarchists, the Situationist International, fake foundation-funded passionarias, and others. And he's saying that there's a undercurrent of discontent and revolt against the facilitators. Well, as I say here, down with the facilitators. Kick out the facilitators, these mind benders, go to majority rule and get some fighting demands. So continue, please, Eric.
Okay, so actually picking up on the point that you just made with regard to the international facilitators, I believe you've mentioned this in previous weeks. You have these accounts, these eyewitness accounts of these Spaniards coming out of Madrid from the Indignado movement who are come to New York to occupy Wall Street, sort of helping to establish the model, this consensus model, right? Now, I also have eyewitness accounts now of these same Spanish infiltrators have sort of moved away from the spotlight, but they're actually now still there, and they're flying under the radar. And the way they've done this is by taking refuge within the Spanish language working group. And this is the way for them to stay within the Occupy Wall Street movement, but outside of the spotlight. So they implant themselves within a purely Spanish language working group. And I think from there, they're able to, if not direct, at least to observe and to provide some kind of direction for whatever facilitators or whatever secret steering committee there might be. So these Spaniards...
One thing, in a later segment, I have a lady coming on from Spain. It's Pilar Bazelga, who has this interesting blog, Don't Die an Idiot, No Morir Idiota, and she's got a full account of how the Indignados were hijacked by facilitators, and she mentions some names of these people. One in particular, she says, an Italian woman named Mara ran the evening General Assembly in Madrid at the Puerta del Sol and was basically a complete saboteur of everything going on. So we're going to try to get it that way. If we could come up with some names of these Spanish infiltrators, we could feed them back to Pilar there in Spain.
Yes, and again, something we've talked about before, the difficulty in actually getting these names. It is very difficult. I've been down there many times, and yet I'm not able to come up with anything other than first names. And these first names that I am getting, this is from photographic evidence, right? So anyway, I want to move on to a couple more points in the time that I have remaining, and that is I apologize for the noise behind me. I'm sort of in a restaurant right now. So,
go ahead. Okay.
We have some of these events that seem to not make any sense. I want to try to make sense of them. One of these events from this week was the March on the Homes of Millionaires here in Manhattan. Okay, the marches, some of these events, such as storming the Brooklyn Bridge and all these other seemingly mindless, idiotic ideas, these are coming from something called the Direct Action Committee, right? This Direct Action Committee are the ones who are organizing stunts, publicity stunts, right? And these publicity stunts, these are being done specifically to discredit the movement and to distract people away from what it is they're supposed to be doing. Okay, and this is tremendously important because if people are able to understand how these infiltrators are doing this, you can actually prevent it from happening. The Direct Action Committee is something that we need to be looking at further, and I'd like to come back next week and discuss it more. Now, to teach... The teach-in. The teach-in is something that we also want to point out. So I did a teach-in last night on counter-revolution and infiltration of movements throughout history. Now, we go back to 1917 in Russia and bring it all the way forward to the Arab Spring of today. Now, without going into the details of this, I just want to point out one thing. I had about, I would say, between 20 and 30 people who showed up. Now, all but two absolutely loved the presentation, said it was incredibly informative, and that they were able to walk away with a lot to think about. However, I also had two who became incredibly irritable, incredibly uncomfortable, and in fact belligerent. And I think that this is the behavior of agents, of infiltrators. And so one of the ways I think that people are going to be able to flush them out of this movement, is by talking about the tactics of counter-revolution, the tactics of infiltrating movements. Because as soon as you do that, all of a sudden their demeanor changes. They no longer seem to be, happy and joyful and positive, and they turn very negative, very aggressive, and oftentimes they tend to go away. I was just speaking about this with somebody else, right? The idea is if you can flush them out, they tend to go away. Because once their cover is blown, they can no longer actually achieve what it is that they're there for, and their purpose is defeated. And I think that this tactic is really how we're going to be able to do it. If you're able to flush them out, you can get rid of them. Now, one last point that I want to mention, and that is that the notion of the consensus model is dying. Okay, I think people who have been down there now realize that this is simply the path to failure. And so what's happening is a new model is emerging. And what I think you might see is whenever it does actually finally get cold here in New York City and the park becomes cleared and people go into their own little circles, you can have a real movement emerge out of this. The labor unions are there. The young people are there. All of the makings of a mass movement is there. You simply have to shed the infiltrators.
So get rid of this strangulating, this straitjacket, this Procrustean bed of this crazy method of the assemblies, the ideological consensus and the facilitators and the working groups. How about this? When you mentioned this Direct Action Committee, is that an outside organization that calls itself Direct Action Committee, or is that a subcommittee of the Occupy Wall Street?
This is a subcommittee implanted within the body of Occupy Wall Street, and this is exactly the point, because if they're the ones who are coordinating these stunts, then they're the ones who need to be removed. Because if you can get rid of this notion of these publicity stunts, I think they have another one planned for Saturday. They're marching to Times Square for some reason. I couldn't even explain to you. To go, I guess,
maybe the NASDAQ, right? Maybe they're going to tell you that the NASDAQ is at Times Square.
Right, or Chase Bank, or something along these lines. In other words, things that are irrelevant, they'll go after. But the actual things that you need to be going after, they leave them alone. And the idea is that if you represent the real institutions of power and you are an agent for those institutions, then you couldn't possibly be involved in organizing any kind of events against them. And so this is how you manipulate and subvert the movement. This is this is no different than somebody like like an Alexander Parvus in the early 20th century, right?
Exactly. The movement.
Right. So if you infiltrate the leftists, right, if you infiltrate opposition movements and you can divert them, you can misdirect them, you can destroy the movements themselves. And this is what's happening here.
Did they go to Soros's house when they did this march?
Of course not. Of course not. And they also did not. And they also did not go to Bloomberg's house, right? Because they apparently seem to love Bloomberg for some reason, right? They did go to, I believe, Jamie Dimon's house, which, could be a good thing. But again, what is it exactly that you achieve by doing this? Nothing. The answer is nothing.
It's much better to talk about the Wall Street sales tax that everybody would support rather than this sort of vindictive, singling out individuals, this sort of French Revolution guillotine stuff, which obviously for many people is harder to accept. But the idea, 1% tax on Wall Street turnover, who can be against it?
Right, and of course, again, what you do see, though, is you see people who want to actually discuss these issues, but they're sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say shouted down, but it's definitely pushed aside. And the reason why is because there's this irrational fear of concrete demands. right? This fear of concrete demands, and I think this emanates from this idea of consensus. Of course, you don't want consensus on real issues. There is consensus, and it exists on the Wall Street sales tax, on the amnesty on student debt, on the stop to all foreclosures, on the creation of union jobs. There is consensus on these things. They don't want it. If I could just mention for people to follow me on Twitter at Stop Imperialism, that's Stop Imperialism.
Okay. Maybe we want to set up a labor committee inside the Occupy Wall Street labor committee. There's a precedent. We'll see you next week, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Very interesting report. And again, maybe what Occupy Wall Street needs is a labor committee to handle relations with the unions. Very interesting idea. So I wonder, do we have our guest now for this segment? Okay, wonderful. I'm very happy to now be able to bring you from the source of a lot of this stuff, from Madrid and from Spain, the land of the indignados, who are cited so frequently as the source of this method of the straitjacket and the Procrustean bed, as we have called it. And this is now our honored guest is Pilar Baselga, who is in Spain, and she is the author, the sponsor of a very interesting blog called No Morir Idiota, Don't Die an Idiot. In other words, figure out something before you die. And it's basically a very important article about the methods of manipulating and sabotaging the movement of the indignados that had all kinds of potential. They could have brought down Zapatero. They could have stopped the International Monetary Fund, the European Central Bank, and the European Commission with that bunch of fascists there. But no, they had to spend all their time in these assemblies. So, Pilar, are you there?
Yes, here I am.
Wonderful. Welcome. We're so happy to have you. Now, we have about 20 minutes, so our basic method is I've read this very interesting article. Can you give our listeners a summary of this, remembering that most of them don't know too much about what happened in Spain back in May and June, as I understand it?
Yes. Well, all these, as far as I know, I was very, as everybody, enthusiastic about this movement, you can imagine. And while we went there to the main square, in Madrid called Puerta del Sol, right? And
right.
This is where a big demonstration started in May 15th. That's why it has given the name to the movement. May 15M is the name of the movement, right? And then we went there to demonstrate, etc. And then we started participating in, myself and friends in these assemblies. And we started noticing that it was very strange, that it was always, there were some, what you call in your article, facilitators who were in a way directing the talks, directing the issues to discuss. And it was just talk and long talks about nothing, and it was very disappointing. And then we started walking around these camp that was prepared, and I went there with some friends who were actually working in the army and said, this has been made by militaries. It's a military organization. So I started taking pictures and talking to people, and it was very strange that they have an incredible infrastructure. I mean, this was not at all a spontaneous movement. It was prepared, it was organized, it was directed. They had lots of, they had food, they had electricity, they had generators for electricity, and nobody knew where it was coming from, I was asking people, where did you get your Wi-Fi antenna and all these computers and everything they had there in the middle of the square? And they said, people collaborating with the movement. And I said, I can't trust this, And then they started bringing water and food from, nobody knew where all this stuff was coming from, right? And,
it's fascinating. Let me just interject. What we've learned here at Occupy Wall Street is that there's a secret steering committee, and a lot of these people seem to be military. That is, they're either active duty or recently retired U.S. military who are actually the steering committee behind the scenes, behind the General Assembly.
Exactly. So I don't know what is the purpose. You might know it better because you are there. But here, what the purpose was to channel the dissent. This is, to me, the purpose. I mean, with the crisis that, as you know, has been designed. I mean, it's not a natural crisis. It has been designed by those who run the world, right? And what they wanted is to channel the dissident, the dissent. You understand what I mean? Yes?
Exactly. Channeling dissent.
And so they focus young people in don't vote, right? But in Spain, this was like a week before the general elections. Not the general, the regional, for the different communities. You know, we have a kind of a federation, and there were some elections. So what happened is that after these week of camp and talks and assemblies and movement of indignados, what happened is the right won everywhere in Spain, as it has never happened. And the left lost completely everything. So it was pretty surprising to discover that a movement which purpose is to bring more democracy, apparently, actually it was working for the extreme right and the right. So that's why I am absolutely sure that this has been manipulated. And then talking with other friends and other people who were also very worrying about this, they were talking about an American guy who was Vlad Teichberg. This guy
Can we spell his name? Vlad?
Vlad, like Vladimir, you know, the Russian name, VLAD. Teichberg is Teichberg. No, G. Teichberg. Okay. And I looked in internet, and this guy is sort of also an activist. But he was seen in a flat that was in the old town of Madrid, working with a team of young people, and they were on Facebook all day, you know, and Twitter and all these nets, to send messages and actually to control what was designed and decided during the assemblies. Very funny things happen. I mean, there was general assemblies, they had to vote some issues, and the result of the assembly was published in a newspaper, El País, which is the biggest newspaper in Spain, before it was voted. Can you imagine this?
So El País had the news before the poor dupes.
Exactly, before it was voted.
Ones in the General Assembly knew it.
Yeah, it's amazing. So of course, El País director and president of the group is Mr. Cebrián, who is a Bilderberg. He goes for these 12 last years to all the meetings of Bilderberg, right? So you can see what this is about. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. It's very, very interesting what is happening. But I'm very happy to talk to you so that we might bring some light to American people, and they see that they don't have to be manipulated. They have to don't trust. And to me, the first let's say clue, okay, to find what is going on is if you have a lot of information on the mass medias. This is the meaning. This means that it's working for those who run the world, right? So the Indignados movement had an incredible following by the press and the TVs, and when I saw this, I say, this is not what we think. There is something underneath that we have to investigate. That's why I went there and took pictures and denounced, and let me
ask you now, at the end of all of this, at the end of all the general assemblies and the talking and the facilitators and everything, what really did they accomplish? I mean, you've just said that one of the things they did was they created a backlash in the form of these right-wing and, I suppose, neo-fascist parties winning.
The neo-fascists were behind. What
else did they accomplish?
They channeled the dissent. This is fantastic. I mean, what the accomplice is that the right, an extreme right, won the elections. This is what they wanted, right? They want to destroy the sovereign states, okay? A little bit more. It is already done. To me, it's even not necessary, because the President Zapatero and the head of the opposition...
The music tells us the segment is over. We're going to be back in 3 minutes. Please stay with us, so stay on the line. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to our second hour here of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley in Washington, D.C. World Crisis Radio, your mass strike headquarters. Follow it all at tarpley.net, tarpley.net, Twitter feed, Webster G. Tarpley, Webster G. Tarpley on Twitter. Now, we're very happy to be having an extremely informative interview with Pilar Baselga in Spain. And Pilar, before we go any further, can you tell our listeners your blog? And I find it very interesting. In particular, there's this one article about the indignados. But tell us the web address and maybe a couple of things about your blog in general.
Yes. Well, my blog name is No Morir Idiota. I cannot. Well, no, NOMORIRIDIOT. It's in Spanish. And the purpose of my blog is to try to bring some light to this mess we are living nowadays. And what I'm discovering is that right and left doesn't exist. So just the announcement of this lady talking just before a minute ago, saying that Obama is bad and Republican is good. This is, sorry, it's bullshit. I mean, all these Bush and Obama are the same.
These sponsors have nothing to do with it.
Yes, I know. You are sponsors, but I'm sorry.
This is not my idea of a sponsor.
Okay, so what I mean is that doesn't matter. I mean, who we elect. They don't rule the world. I mean, those who really pull the strings, we don't know them. We don't know. They are beyond we don't even know their names, you know?
Okay, so now this is the topic that would lead us far.
Point is...
I would like to get back, if we could, to the indignados. We just had a report from my correspondent, Eric Draitzer, in New York City. He says that at the beginning of Occupy Wall Street, there was a group of Spanish veterans, Spanish indignados, came to the steering committee of Occupy Wall Street in July and August as part of imposing this crazy consensus assembly model. They came, and some of them are still there. He mentioned that instead of acting in the larger General Assembly, where they might attract media attention, some of the Spanish indignados veterans they've focused on the Spanish language discussion group, because they have that. In Occupy Wall Street, there's a whole General Assembly in Spanish, parallel to the one in English, and this is where some of these people are found. And what I remember reading your article, what stood out for me is the Italian woman Mara, who ran the evening assemblies. Can you tell us some of these others? Because you have pictures of other people up there. Could you give us just a quick rundown on some of these individuals and their specialties? Maybe it would be possible to identify some of them. The people who wrecked Madrid are now busy wrecking in Occupy Wall Street. Well,
there you have the pictures, and I don't know who are there in New York, but probably as I hang the pictures on my blog, now they have other people, okay? And they present themselves as veterans. Their specialty is to take the attention towards stupid things, like the problem of, as you said, the bags, sleeping bags, or things like that. I mean, they were arguing and they were always talking, and for ages, about stupid things, because the purpose is not to find any solution or to propose anything special, but to, in the case of Spain, to generate a movement of indignation, of being out of, of angriness, right?
Of complaining, right? Of whining and complaining.
Yeah, and that's all. I mean, to keep people entertained is like TV, like soap opera. This Indignados movement is soap opera for zombies who think they are making a revolution, but actually they are doing nothing but forgetting to go to work, to go to vote. You see, this is the only thing we can do in the system we are, is to vote. And this movement was bringing people not to vote. And that's why we have what we have now. And it's going to be worse in the future. And I don't agree at all with what you sent to me when you say that we have to turn right to find a solution. It's not right or left. It's always the same thing. Bankers are running the world. And they are doing anything to make us follow their stupid movement of monopoly money that has nothing behind, as you know. The dollar has nothing, it's paper. And we have to think in another direction. So this is to keep the attention towards something that is a dead end, It's really interesting. But people love this. This is like a new religion, Before they went to church, now they go to Wall Street. It's the same.
My point is that if you look at the austerity enforcers, most of them are from the Second International. They're CIA, Soros agents. That would be Papandreou, Zapatero, Socrates, a whole array of these people. The Italian communists, or the Italian whatever they call themselves, they can't wait to get into power. They could deliver more austerity than Berlusconi. So what I'm saying is, as we see here with Obama, if the leader of the progressive coalition or the positive coalition is an agent of Wall Street, you've got to get rid of the Wall Street agents. You can't say, let's keep Wall Street agents, Soros people as our leaders and then expect to succeed. And, of course, the program is the main thing. And the program is, this is beyond left and right. I have a 5-point program. One of the things here is to cancel all the student loans, right? $1 trillion debt amnesty. And most of these countries in Europe, Greece certainly, they need a unilateral debt moratorium. They have to follow the example of Mexico, Brazil, Argentina. Cancel the debt. You can easily get 50 to 60% debt reduction by taking the step of a debt moratorium. But rather than a long policy discussion, tell us more about what it looked like on the ground in Madrid when these people were intervening. What did they do? Did they cut people off? How did they do it? You said that there was a secret headquarters behind the scenes where it was all planned.
Well, I was not a detective, I have not James Bond. So I just wanted to be sure of my feeling. I don't know exactly all the details, but what was evident is that those who were in every commission, because it was divided in commissions, the commissions talking about laws, the commission about energy, the commission about, they were different, is that in all these groups, you had people belonging to the backstage movement, right? And they were directing, for example, you went to a commission, you start talking about whatever you want, but what was finally wrote on the summary of what was said is what they wanted to be written. You understand what I mean? It was everything. It was very well planned. These are professional. Real professionals of manipulation people. And then those who are free thinkers like me, we just look at that and we just left the camp, right? And those who were there were zombies, these people who, and then at night, what was very interesting is that we're bringing drugs and they were paying the beggars. They were paying the beggars to stay in the camp when they wanted to get rid of the camp. So the mission was to the right wing to win the elections. Once this was done, all the assemblies were talking about let's abandon the camp, right? We didn't have to be here anymore. So to destroy the movement, they paid beggars and homeless to be there among to destroy the movement so that let's say in a way people who have a bathtub at home, right, went out because it was unbearable to be there with all these beggars and homeless hanging around. You see, it was very, very well done.
But just my question is, with these professionals, right? These professional manipulators,
yes.
Where do they come from? What is the background that they seem to have?
Well, so. I wrote it down, and I can say it on the. This is my opinion.
Go ahead.
I haven't. Yes, the name of this guy is Enrique Dans, D-A-N-S. This is a professor of a very fancy, elegant, and classy business school.
Hang on one second,
right?
We're going to do 2 or 3 minutes in the next segment if we could, and then we'll go on to our next guest. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio, your Mass Strike headquarters. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, your Mass Strike headquarters. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. We just have a couple of more minutes with Pilar Bazelga. The very interesting blog is called No Morir Idiota, Don't Die a Fool. Take a look at it. It's in Spanish, but you can just click the thing, the bobblefish or whatever it is will translate it for you, and that seems to work pretty well. Now, Pilar, you were just mentioning the guy that you've essentially identified as at least being one of the leading ideologues of this, Enrique Dans. Can you just give us that rundown?
Yes. So this professor has studied at Harvard, and he probably has inherited the very great school of Edward Bernays that I hope everybody knows. And if you don't know, please see the video called "The Century of the Self." And then in the YouTube, you can see who was this guy. Bernays is the creator of what is called the social engineering, which is how to manipulate the mass through. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He was a very, very smart guy, and he knew how to do it. So this social engineering then was developed by the Rockefeller Foundation in Harvard, and they have been doing very well. I mean, they do a very good job. It's really, people think that we live in democracy, and it's not true, and that our elections have a meaning, and it's not true, because afterwards, those who are running the world are others that you never know who they are. Well, this is an idea of Edward Bernays, and this guy probably he has here an office, company, and he is working professionally in this. I mean, he creates he creates the market for a client, and apparently the client of these guys, in this case of the Indignados movement, is the extreme right. I mean, and the very extreme right. I mean, fascist and neo-Frankists, neo-fascists, anarcho-capitalists. And what is this? For those who don't know what is anarcho-capitalism is, we destroy the state because the only thing important is freedom of money. This is the idea. Money has to be free, the market has to be free, and no control at all. So we don't need, of course, politicians have to be corrupt. Better to have corrupt politicians than good politicians. That's why you have Berlusconi, for example, who is a very famous corrupt, and he's there for ages because he's helped out all these people, I mean. So I don't know.
Okay, so this is Enrique Dans. I guess we have to wrap up now. Pilar, this is extremely valuable. And again, I guess people can go to your website, the No Morir Idiota. If you see these characters in Occupy Wall Street, and if they are these Spanish Indignados, look them up on No Morir Idiota, and maybe we can identify some of them, and we'll know what their track record was in Madrid. So that's No Morir Idiota, and it's Pilar Bazelga. And we want to thank you very much.
They will see on the right-hand side of the most popular posts. The first one is the one where I explain, I take the pictures, I show how it is a military camp, how you have an infrastructure, and where they can find the photos of these people who were here, these famous facilitators who were really working there from 10 to 10. It was really amazing how the energy. I went to some of them, I said, I hope they are paying you well because you do a very good job, I said to them.
Exactly. And again, I think out of this interview has come from me a classic line that some of these people are, that they Occupy Wall Street or the Indignados, a soap opera for zombies who think they are making a revolution.
Of course.
I want to thank you for that. And please keep in touch. We want to get some updates. And again, what we're trying to do is to figure out the connection, because it was Spanish Indignados who came in at the creation of the Occupy Wall Street.
The first place where it was done, it is in Greece. Then it was done in Egypt. Okay?
Okay.
And the movement in Egypt was to invade Libya. It's all related. It's the same movement. Right. It's using the Facebook and the webs to manipulate people. Okay.
Okay. Do you have any names on the Greek side? I would just be fascinated to trace it back even further, because it is, as you say, a counterinsurgency strategy designed to abort the tremendous potential of these movements, that they don't go revolutionary, they never get a program, they never get an independent organization, they don't produce any leaders, and then it's all over.
And then they infiltrate inside some very violent people, so that the movement that starts as a pacific movement becomes very aggressive, like violent, like in London, like in England, and I don't know, in Manchester was that it was so in England, so violent, so that this justifies the repression of the police. You understand? It's very stupid. It's always the same thing. You know, when you read the history and you know history, when you have the French Revolution, then afterwards you have the dictatorship of Napoleon. Can you understand this? How can you explain that after a revolution you have a dictatorship? Well, this is what is going to happen now. It's a movement, it's a cycle movement that goes revolution, dictatorship, false democracy. It starts again. Revolution, dictatorship, false democracy. Okay? So now we are at the end of the false democracy. We start the revolution, and we are going towards the dictatorship.
Well, let's see if we can't hijack the hijackers. Let's culture jam the culture jammers. Let's détourner
because
and
in the time of Napoleon,
we got to push on. We got to report on.